Today is March 26, 2014, and we are interviewing Tom Leeper at the Adams County Courthouse in Quincy, Illinois. Mr. Leeper is 69 years old. He was born on October 14th of 1944. My name is Laura Keck, and I'll be the interviewer. Mr. Leeper, could you state for the recording what war and branch of service you served in?
I was in the United States Air Force and served in the Vietnam War.
And what was your highest rank that you achieved?
Lieutenant Colonel.
And what years did you serve with the Air Force?
I went in 1968, and I served on active duty until 1975. And then I was in the Guard and Reserves through 1994.
And you said you served in Vietnam. Where in Vietnam did you serve?
I actually was stationed in Korat, Thailand. So we had nice facilities as far as eating and sleeping. We flew over Vietnam.
Were you able to get immersed in the culture there while you were over there?
Not very much. You really didn't go off base. Certainly there were a number of Thai workers that worked on base. So you interacted a little bit with very few of the men, and a number of the ladies were involved in working at the club where you ate, and they were kind enough to clean our hooch where we slept and hung out.
That is nice. Were you able to bring any mementos back from there with you?
I don't remember anything in particular. Excuse me.
What was your job or assignment while you were over there?
I was an electronic warfare officer.
What is that?
Well, initially I was enlisted, and then I went to officer training school. Then I went to navigator training. That took 9 months. And then I went through a 6-month training after that in electronic warfare, where we learned all about not only our own radar systems, but more importantly, Russian radar systems, and in particular, how to jam those systems. And then I got checked out in an EB-66 as an electronic warfare officer, and that's what I traveled to Vietnam and did.
So explain to us what that means, what you did in Vietnam, exactly.
Yeah, well, there were two airplanes. One was reconnaissance, and one was active jamming. The one I flew in the most was active jamming, where we had EB-66 is a twin-engine bomber, medium-range bomber, but we had no bombs. The whole bomb bay was full of just electronic devices. And we had a whole battery of jammers. There was a pilot, was up front, known as a navigator, that sat to the left side, and we sat on the right side. There were three crew in this one particular plane. And the electronic warfare officer operated a battery of 20 to 25 jammers that we jammed. Different radars that the North Vietnamese had. For example, long-range radars were called early warning radars. They'd go out a couple hundred miles, and then they had height-finding radars that could determine height. And they had target tracking radars that would target you for a particular weapon system like AAA anti-aircraft artillery or SAM surface-to-air missiles. The biggest threat to our airplanes at that time were surface-to-air missiles. High in the air and at low altitude were AAA anti-aircraft artillery. Fortunately, we flew between 25 and 30,000 feet, and the only thing that could get to us were either SAMs or MiGs, meaning the Russian airplanes that the North Vietnamese flew.
So did you end up having any casualties in your unit?
Yes. We were a lot more fortunate than most. We had a couple of airplanes had accidents while I was there. We didn't actually have one shot down exactly while I was there. When I went back in April of '72, we had one that they made a movie out of called Bat-21.
Mm-hmm.
It was EB-66, got shot down by a surface-to-air missile in March of 2000, excuse me, I get the right date here. It'd be March of 1972. And that was they had 6 people in an airplane, and one of them came back, Colonel Hamilton.
Mm-hmm.
Took 11 days to get him out in what's called a SAR effort, surface to air rescue, air rescue mission. And they actually made a movie out of it called Bat 2 Run.
And
Gene Hackman played Colonel Hamilton.
This was one that was actually struck down.
Yeah, it was shot down by a surface-to-air missile.
But you had came back during that
Yeah,
time.
I actually wasn't there in March of '72. I was back in April. I was there before they got him out. He came back to Karate, got to meet him, but I wasn't in the unit. It was a few weeks after that he got shot down when I was there.
Did you yourself ever sustain any injuries?
No.
Were you a prisoner of war?
No.
I assume you were awarded medals and citations while you were there, and since that time?
Yes.
What were you awarded?
There were lots of awards, and simply for being in the Air Force, simply for serving the time of war, simply for being in, they had what they call different campaigns, and I don't specifically remember the different campaigns, but if you flew combat missions, you got an air medal. As a general rule, if it wasn't anything overly exciting, about every 30 missions. And if you flew north of a particular line over there into Vietnam or up around Hainan Island, you got an air medal for approximately every 10 missions. And it did depend on if you had, some excitement and got shot at or whatever. But I think I got approximately 6 air medals, and then I got a Distinguished Flying Cross for a mission I had in January 1st of 1971, I think it was.
Can you tell us about that mission?
Yeah, we were supporting the B-52 strike at Ban Karai Pass, which is where the Ho Chi Minh Trail came out of North Vietnam, and then later on went back into South Vietnam. And I was running the jammers, and we had B-52s dropping bombs, and the navigator said, "Sure is a lot of AAA out there tonight." And the pilot that's on the left side of the plane, I was on the right side of the plane. The pilot looked back and said, "Holy shit, that's a SAM." And we rolled over to inverted dive and dropped 10,000 feet. And the nav looked back and said, "It's still coming." And we rolled back out, and we started to go down again. But meanwhile, I had switched the jammers specifically onto the track while scan frequency while we were upside down of the particular tracking radar of surface-to-air missiles. And the real irony is we weren't supposed to use a special function on that they were saving for when we went off to Russia to attack Russia. But I turned them on anyway because it was kind of a critical situation there, for a couple of minutes. Anyway, about that time it went off back behind us and we came back home.
You said the pilot had said there were a lot of AAA. What's AAA?
AAA is anti-aircraft artillery. We were 28,000 feet at the time. You can see the AAA coming up. It looks like the 4th of July. But it usually stopped about 18,000 feet, well below us.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we looked out the window and saw AAA, we didn't break. We didn't do what's called a SAM break or a jink or anything from our altitude. But surface-to-air missiles clearly got up as high as we were and had to worry about that. So
okay.
When the pilot decided that wasn't just AAA that night, it was a missile coming at us, that's when we took a dive and successfully evaded it.
That's good. This is kind of switching gears a little bit, I guess. How did you get along with the officers and fellow soldiers while you were over there?
Fine.
Did you feel pressure, stress, or anxiety while you were over there?
Well, of course, there's pressure in flying combat missions, but what I will say is everybody was well trained. Everybody was there to do their job. We were there because our country asked us to be. I did not see any heroes. I didn't see anybody like you see in a movie, and I didn't see any cowards. Everybody did their job and in a professional fashion and the way we were trained, and all the problems that were going on in our country at that time, we didn't deal with that. There was nobody that was objecting to flying. There was nobody that was wanting to protest. The only thing we wanted to protest was Jane Fonda.
Because you were focused on being over there and not.
Well, yeah, I mean, we were all pro-American, pro-military.
Mm-hmm.
Even though we had a draft, I was in the Air Force, so if you were in the Air Force, you weren't actually drafted. But there were plenty of people there because they didn't want to serve in some other service that they might have been serving, for example, the Army otherwise, or even the Marines.
Did you keep a personal diary while you were over there?
No.
Can you tell me about a couple of your most memorable experiences while you were there?
Well, the one I just mentioned would be the most memorable. The second most memorable would be May 10th of 72.
What was that?
I had left there initially in the fall of 71, and then when I was in Germany, flying missions over in Germany in the spring of 72, they wanted volunteers to go back, and you had 24 hours to leave if you volunteered. And actually, I was kind of bored flying the missions we were flying in Germany, so I volunteered to go back. And when I got back to I got back to Bangkok, it said, "Oh, we started bombing North Vietnam again." I go, "Oh, I see why they wanted volunteers." But anyway, I had the privilege of flying on May 10th of 72 after I got back, and it was the first time we had gone back to Hanoi Haiphong area, which was the most heavily defended area since it had been about 5 years. And so they had all that time to build up all of their weapon systems, and for Jane Fonda to come visit. And when they got us out of bed about 4:30 that morning, didn't tell us what was going on. Sent everybody down. There was over 100 of us in a large briefing room, and they actually had the chaplain came in there and said a prayer for us, which they'd never ever done before. The wing commander talked to all of us, which they had never ever done before, and said we were going north for the first time, like I say, in like 5 years. The F4s out of Karat, where we were flying. Now they had smart bombs. They had laser-guided bombs, and it was the first time they used laser-guided bombs against the bridge north of Hanoi that they were trying to knock down, which is where they got their supplies from Haiphong. Am I talking too fast? So it was a big, big deal, and I still remember all of us going out there and all the airplanes firing up at one time, and plane after plane after plane taking off. There were over 100 of us in the air at one time.
100 airplanes? All at once?
All going to Hanoi and Haiphong.
Did people get struck down that day?
We lost 4 F4s, and the North Vietnamese lost 11 MiGs. Steve Ritchie, who was ultimately an Air Force ace, got 1 MiG. Randy Cunningham from Missouri, who was a Navy ace, got 3 MiGs that day. And then he himself got shot down by a surface-to-air missile before he got back out over the Gulf of Tonkin to get back to his aircraft carrier. Then he ended up being a congressman from San Diego and got in trouble for bribery and went to prison.
What was his name? Maybe William.
Yeah, anyway, it's probably shouldn't have even mentioned that.
That is interesting. How were you able to stay in touch with your family?
Oh, writing letters. Probably took 10 days going each way, so you'd write a letter and they'd get it 10 days and then answer it and then come back 10 days later, so it was about 3 weeks from the time you wrote the letters. It was awkward, but it wasn't. We certainly had ample communication.
And who were you keeping in touch with at that time?
My parents and my wife.
Did you do or have anything special you did for good luck while you were over there?
No.
I think
Luck wasn't on the table.
You said you were lucky because you were in Thailand.
Well, I was fortunate.
As
That's
opposed
true.
to some of the other.
Yes, well, we slept in air-conditioned barracks.
Oh, okay.
Well, the people in Vietnam are, out there going through the rice paddies and sleeping in the jungle. There was no comparison.
Did you have plenty of supplies for
Sure.
what you did? And what about your food?
Oh, it was fun.
What types of things did you eat while you were there?
Whatever you wanted. We went to the club and ate and ordered your own food. So no, we had it easy.
How did you entertain yourself?
Well, you're pretty much on duty 12 hours a day. And we played racquetball, shot pool at the club, drank beer once in a while, ran a little bit. That was about most of it.
Did you ever?
Spent
Sorry, go ahead.
You spent most of the time working.
And
We worked
sleeping.
7 days a week.
And
12
sleeping
hours
the
a
other
day.
time.
Yeah.
Did you ever get leave?
Yes. After 6 months, I don't recall. I probably got 3 weeks off.
And what did you do for that time?
Went down to Bangkok and went up to Chiang Mai.
Where is
Place.
Chiang Mai?
Oh, it's northern Thailand where they got lots of carvings.
Oh, okay.
Actually, I did bring back some wood carvings from there.
Do you recall any particularly humorous or unusual event while you were there?
Yeah, Colonel Klump ejected out of an airplane, EB-66, when it went out of control. And when he came down, his parachute opened, but his seat didn't separate properly. And because the seat was hanging on his leg, he came down about twice as fast as you should because the seat weighs 150 pounds. Anyway, he got a little bruise on his leg, and that was it.
Wow.
At his Sawadee party, which is why I'm wearing this particular uniform, we have, whenever someone served or flew 100 missions and was eligible to come back to the United States, at his Sawadee party, he was sliding in the mud, kind of like I've seen other kids do around here. They've got the little plastic slides they've got, you know, we figured out how to do that a long time ago. At parties over in Thailand, and broke his leg. So he came back to the United States with a cast from his toe to his hip, literally from sliding in the mud on his party from his leaving Southeast Asia, and he'd flown about 120 combat missions without being injured.
And you said the time he was landing with, and it didn't, the
Mhm.
parachute didn't go off.
Yeah.
Where was he at when he had that happen?
It actually happened over Thailand. The airplane, the trim control went out of control on the airplane, and they lost control of the airplane and all had to eject. He was
A bruise.
unharmed from that effort. You mentioned another question earlier that I'd forgotten about, but he would never, I remember him in particular, he didn't put bullets in his gun. We had no armament on the airplane except our 6-shooter. We had a Smith & Wesson revolver that held 6 shells, and that's all we had. But for some reason, he didn't carry that either. But I loaded mine, but I didn't take extra ammunition. You could take extra ammunition if you wanted, but we knew those guns weren't worth much against AK-47.
And so that's what I wanted to ask you about, was what you're wearing. Can you explain to us what that is?
Yeah, we had a party. You know, it's the middle of the war, but we had a party whenever somebody was eligible to come back to the States and had flown successfully 100 missions. And every squadron had a different outfit, a different color of flight suit. And then maroon was what the 42nd 2's Tactical Electronic Warfare Squadron had. And so that's what I got on. Somehow I bought this in the fall of 1970. So it's, what, 43 plus years.
And it still fits.
Well, I had to squeeze a little bit to get into it, but
And
so got different patches
the
on.
patches, do you choose those or did the other guys choose those?
I chose them. You know, that people have pretty similar stuff, but yeah, you
Mhm.
actually chose it yourself.
And then I think,
So that's the airplane I flew in, the EB-66.
okay.
And that's the patch you get for the 100 missions over there. So some people see this and they think it's a peace sign. Well, it's our sarcasm of a peace sign. You know, it's a participant in Southeast Asia war games.
So yeah, if you can't see it on the video, can you tell us what it says again?
I think it says, I can't read it upside down, and it's been a while since I looked at it. I think it says participant in Southeast Asia war games. And we've got Snoopy sitting on a doghouse here, as I recall. And this was it said damn the SAMs, I'm not sure.
Even the SAMs.
Because the SAMs, again, the surface to air missiles, and we, in tactical electronic warfare, jammed those radar systems while other airplanes were dropping bombs. But that's what that patch was all about. I've got it up here, I think. Can't see too well. I'm a member of what's called the River Rats Red River Valley Fighter Pilot Association for people that flew missions up around Hanoi.
Oh.
And I think anybody can join if you're a pilot in the Air Force or the military.
And you're currently a member of that.
Yes.
And what types of things do you do with that organization?
Actually, I don't. I joined it a while back and planned to go to some of these reunions that they have, and I've never gotten around to doing it. But there's stories they publish a magazine quarterly
Mm.
and have a number of stories and things that I'm familiar with.
And you said you got that after 100 missions and you got to go home. Is that
Well,
when you
you
went?
got the uniform when you first got there. You actually got the patch after you flew 100 missions.
Okay.
So we all went to everybody's Sawadee party, Sawadee, and celebrated somebody getting 100 missions and heading home.
And was that when you went home after you had your party?
Yeah, the first time,
And when was that?
September of 71.
And then you came back.
Came back in April of 72.
And how long were you there the second time?
Just 3 months. Came back in July of 72. When I say came back, I actually went back to Germany from there.
And when you finally left the military, that was in 1994. Is that where you
Yeah, in
retired?
75, I got out of active duty and went to law school. But I was in the reserves at that point. I joined the Air National Guard over in Springfield, Illinois in 78. And then I flew another 1,400 hours in the F-4 with the Guard units. And then I left the Springfield unit because they got F-16s and I was a backseater in F-4s, and transferred to the St. Louis unit. And then they got F-15s, which didn't require a backseater either. And I got on that in probably 92 and went to Scott Air Base down near Belleville, Scott Air Force in Illinois. And I was there for a couple of years. And we did worldwide transportation, monitored all Air Force, Navy, Marines, Coast Guard, all 5 different services.
Were you also an attorney during all of this?
Well, I was an attorney from 78 on, but as far as the Air Force was concerned, I was a flyer. I wasn't in it. I did not perform legal services in the military.
Did you use the GI Bill for any of your education?
Yeah, I used a GI Bill for going to law school. Yeah, I got something like $300 a month for 3 years going to law school. And when I graduated from law school in 78, I didn't have 1 penny of debt.
Which is very good.
Yeah, it's no comparison to now.
Did you make any close friendships while you were in the service?
Sure.
And have you continued those relationships?
Once in a while. I've been to an EB-66 reunion a couple of times where we still got good friends. And good friends with Bill Abercamp here in Quincy because we used to fly together with the Air National Guard out of Springfield.
And how else do you keep in contact with these people?
Email.
Have you joined any other veterans organizations besides the one we talked about, the River Rats?
I was in American Legion for a while, and I seemed to be in too much stuff. It was probably 10 years ago, and I just got out of a number of organizations, and that was one. It was a good organization, and I support it, but sometimes you get into too much stuff.
Do people thank you for serving our country?
Oh, sure. It's amazing now on Veterans Day for people to thank you for serving. Well, when I came back from Vietnam, you didn't get thanked.
So it's changed.
100%, and I thank the people out there for changing it.
Do you encourage young people to enlist today?
Sure. I mean, my father was in World War II. I was in Vietnam. My son served in both Iraq and Afghanistan, and he's now out. He was in the Marines.
Yeah, we kind of talked about this already, but how do you feel about how war is depicted in the movies?
Well, that depends on the movie. There were some awful movies made in the Vietnam era that were not only not true, but just terrible.
About Vietnam or
Yeah,
during
about
that time?
Vietnam, right. I couldn't stand to watch them at the time, and I've watched a few of them since, and they just about make you vomit.
Do you think that there are some that are accurate now?
Oh, certainly there are a lot of them that are a lot more accurate now, and I think the movies today have lost that anti-USA, anti-military view that they had back then.
What do you think about the way that war and history is taught in school today?
I can't say that I know enough about how it's taught in school today.
What was the most positive thing that you took away from your experience?
Well, the whole thing was a positive experience for me. I was just fortunate. I was in the right place in the right time. I was never physically injured, and as far as mentally, it puts you on top of your game. Kind of like being an attorney here in the courtroom when you're got a jury trial. It's the same thing when you're out there flying around with airplanes in the sky, and you got to figure out what to do, when to do it, and how to do it.
And what do you think was the most negative thing that you had?
I don't have any negative thing to say about my military experience.
Is there anything else you would like to add?
I do have a story about my father that I might go into.
Yes.
Um, my father, I didn't see him till I was 2, and he was off in the South Pacific, and he was an officer in the Navy. And he wrote a little bit of stories from time to time, but not really about the military, but he had that ability. But after he passed away in '93. After he passed away, I found something he had written that he'd never once spoken to me about. But when he was off Iwo Jima, he was in a Navy destroyer, I think, and they did minesweeping operations. And he wrote about, this had been 1945, I believe, a minesweeping operation. They picked up this small boat. Picked up may not be the right word. A Japanese shell had hit this relatively small boat and killed everybody in it except one person. And he said to think about it made him cry. And I had never, to this day, I've never seen my father cry. My mother was still alive, and I mentioned it to her, and she said that my dad mentioned it once at a Sunday school class and then started crying. At any rate, after my father passed away, Jerry Jenkins, he runs the Ursa elevator, talked to me and he said, "Hey, I hear your dad was in on rescuing my uncle." I went, "Really?" I said, "Yeah, it was Marion Jenkins from Lorraine." And he told me the story. It was the same story. So I personally went to see Marion Jenkins because he was still alive at that time. He said, yeah, he said that he was in the Marines and they went out and swept these mines, and that all he knows is his boat he was in got hit by a shell, and he woke up in Hawaii. Didn't know anything, but he understood that the rest of the people had been killed and that my father had been on rescuing him. So my father lived in Lima, Illinois, and we farmed there. Marion Jenkins lived in Lorraine, Illinois. It's like 15 miles apart, or maybe a few miles less than that. My dad never talked to him, and he never talked to my dad. I asked Marion Jenkins about it myself. Says you just don't talk about it. So, what you're doing here, it's kind of a little awkward because you're talking about things you don't normally talk about. But here's my dad and Marion Jenkins got together off Iwo Jima in the middle of World War II, and yet here they live 12 miles, 15 miles apart, never ever got together and never ever talked about it.
And they knew they were that close.
Marion Jenkins did. I'm not sure what my dad knew.
And he never told you the story or anything?
No. I said my dad wasn't hurt. His ship got hit by a kamikaze off Okinawa a little bit after this. But he was not personally injured. Killed a lot of people on the boat, but not him, fortunately, and he wasn't injured. I flew over there a fair amount and wasn't injured. And then my son goes to Iraq, comes back okay, and then he goes to Afghanistan, and he's in a truck that runs over an IED, and he actually gets injured a little bit, spends a little time in the hospital, but he's out now, he's okay.
Is your son still in the service?
No, he's gotten out. So he's no longer in the service. He's actually a deputy sheriff in Camden County, Missouri.
Is there anything else you would like to share with us?
No.